Welcome to Thriving Gracefully. Today, for the second in my exotic travel series, we're going to Mongolia, a fascinating off-the-beaten-path destination with a storied history, breathtaking landscapes, and the world's last truly nomadic culture. We'll start in the capital city, Ulaanbaatar, then go on to the Gobi Desert to visit Nomads, experience the famous Naadam Festival, and explore one of the world's best areas for fossil prospecting. Stick around for the discovery of a spectacular dinosaur skull. For real. We'll finish our journey at Lake Hovsgol near Siberia and meet the Tsataan reindeer people who live in teepees. So, come on. Let's go. First off, Mongolia is an independent country surrounded by China on the west, south, and east, and Russia to the north. Its capital, Ulaanbaatar, is only about 2 hours by plane from Beijing and 3 hours from Seoul. Most trips to Mongolia begin in Ulaanbaatar, also called UB. Today, it's a modern city of 1.5 million people, half of the entire country's population. I've actually been to Mongolia twice, 15 years apart, and UB's developed tremendously in that span of time owing to foreign investments in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet influence. Most recently, we stayed in the Shangri-La Hotel, which was lovely. There's a lot to see in and near Ulaanbaatar. First, a visit to Sukbatar Square, dominated on one side by the Parliament building, complete with a huge statue of Genghis Khan, or Chinggis Khan as the Mongolians call him. We know him as a destructive conqueror, but Chinggis Khan is revered in Mongolia because he initiated law and civilization, practiced religious and racial tolerance, and his empire valued the leadership of women. You should definitely stop at the Chinggis Khan Museum, a new and modern facility with outstanding exhibits on the rich Mongolian history. Mongolia is famous for cashmere, and there are several lovely stores where you can buy cashmere items for very reasonable prices. I bought 2 sweaters at the Gobi brand store. The State Department store is worth a stop. It was once owned by the government and is now private. It's a huge modern department store. The cashmere selection there is excellent. Head to the top floor for a selection of high-quality souvenirs. For a great view of the city, go to the Tsataan World War II Memorial. And if you want to get out of the city and into nature, consider a day trip or spend several days in Gorky Terelj National Park, about a 2-hour drive from UB. Well, we spent a day there during our first trip to Mongolia in 2008, and we rode camels, visited a nomadic gur, and hiked to the lovely Buddhist Aryabal Meditation Temple, high up on a mountain. Up next, the famous Gobi Desert. But quickly, before we get there, let me share a bit about how we planned our journeys. Both of our trips to Mongolia were under the auspices of the Alf Museum of Paleontology in Claremont, California, which facilitates fossil prospecting trips for friends of the museum. They engaged Nomadic Expeditions, a travel agency specializing in Mongolia, for all of the museum's Mongolian adventures. My husband and I have been very happy with Nomadic. They offer both group tours and private itineraries for couples, families, and groups of friends. In addition to Mongolia, they can help you plan a trip to India, Bhutan, Nepal, and Tibet. I'll include a link in the description to learn more and receive a special benefit if you mention this channel, Thriving Gracefully, and ultimately book a trip. Now we're going to the Gobi. It's a 90-minute flight from UB to Ulaanbaatar in the heart of the Gobi in southern Mongolia. Upon arrival, it's unmistakable that you're in dinosaur country. It's high desert with flat steppe lands and large dune complexes. The elevation is between 3,000 and 5,000 feet, contributing to extremely low temperatures in the winter. It's a delightful place in the summer, though it can get quite hot during the day. The Gobi in Mongolia is famous for its paleontology discoveries, such as dinosaur eggs and the so-called fighting dinosaurs, which were a velociraptor and a protoceratops, which we got to see at the Institute of Paleontology when we were in UB. After landing in the Gobi, we were driven in a caravan of SUVs, not always without minor setbacks, to the Yul Valley at the foot of the Altai Mountains, where we got to stretch our legs. Along the way, we saw beautiful scenery, the local nomads, herds of camels roaming the steppe, and the occasional gur and ovo, which are rock piles like a cairn used as border markers or shrines in Mongolian folk religious practice. And of course, gurs are like yurts where the nomads live. Then we drove 3 hours to the Hongrenel sand dunes, sometimes known as the Singing Dunes, that run for 60 miles along the mountain range and reach up to 600 feet in height. We had to keep our speed to get through the dunes to the other side, and we had fun climbing and running down. Our first accommodation in the Gobi was the simple but pleasant Gobi Erdene camp, right at the foot of the dunes. While there, we visited a nomadic gur and rode camels. For the better part of a week, we actually camped on the floor of the Gobi, driving in a caravan and stopping in 4 locations for fossil exploration. We had fun getting from site to site, even car racing across the desert. Along the way, we got to see what small town life is like in Mongolia. In 2008, we were there during the world-famous Naadam Festival. There are competitions in wrestling, horse racing, and archery all around the country during a few days in July. I loved experiencing the festival on a small town scale. Some nomads, thanks to generators and satellite dishes, watch the big matches on TVs in their gurs. While exploring the Gobi, beautiful camps were set up for us. Each couple had a private tent with cots, a small table, sleeping bags, and towels. We had shower tents where we pumped hot water from a canister and tents with portable toilets. We enjoyed excellent and healthy meals with wine and beer available in a large tent set up for dining. But the real stars of the show were the scenery around us, the wonderful company, and the fossil explorations. Speaking of fossil prospecting, Nomadic coordinated with the Mongolian government to include a Mongolian paleontologist who accompanied us along with Alf Museum paleontologists. We were allowed to prospect for and extract fossils under this rare arrangement. Anything we found stayed in Mongolia. Now that you have a taste of what it's like in the Gobi, let's go find a dinosaur. One of the Gobi's most prolific fossil sites is Tugegriin Shiree, a white sandstone escarpment, and it did not disappoint. It was the site of the discovery of the famous fighting dinosaurs we saw in UB and contains excellent specimens of mammals and dinosaurs from the late Cretaceous period, from 66 to 110.5 million years ago. What looked like a rock to me turned out to be the climax of our trip, the head of a Protoceratops dinosaur. It was found by the retired Alf Museum director and paleontologist Dr. Don Lofgren. So here's what it looked like when Don walked by. I would have totally missed it. It's quite a process to dig out a fossil and preserve its integrity. First, you dig around it to expose it, and this can take hours, days, or even weeks, maybe more. This head took several hours. I was unable to capture footage of the head extraction, so I'm going to show you the extraction of a Protoceratops tail that our team excavated in another location. After digging out the fossil, then you jacket it in plaster and extract it from the ground. Everyone who participated was really proud of their accomplishment and contribution to science. While we were out at Tugegriin Shiree, we experienced a dramatic sandstorm, not an uncommon occurrence in the Gobi. That sandstorm is coming our way. We've broken down camp as much as we can, and we're gonna just hunker down in the truck. Our guides and staff were at the ready to dismantle our dining tent before it was lost to the wind. It calmed down and we dined al fresco that night. Later, a big rainstorm blew through. I'm just lying down in the tent, kind of waiting out the storm. I hope that the fossil prospectors are okay. But the next day was glorious. And we were all excited to shake off the dust and conclude our time in the Gobi at the luxurious, sustainable resort, 3 Camel Lodge, owned and operated by Nomadic Expeditions. If you go to Mongolia and are looking for a more upscale and yet authentic Mongolian experience, you can't go wrong. The accommodations, food, and services are just outstanding. No trip to Mongolia is complete, at least in my view, without a stop at the legendary Flaming Cliffs. It was there that dinosaurs from the Gobi Desert were discovered around 100 years ago by an American Natural History Museum expedition led by museum director Roy Chapman Andrews, the real live Indiana Jones. They were actually looking for origins of humans. The first positively identified dinosaur eggs were discovered at the Flaming Cliffs. Today, it's a Mongolian national park. There, we were treated to a wonderful reception and musical performance with the Flaming Cliffs as the backdrop. It was magical. We weren't quite done with Mongolia, so my husband and I and some friends of ours booked an extension for a few days at Lake Hovsgol in northern Mongolia. We flew to the town of Moron and drove the rest of the way to the lake. It's quite far north and much cooler there. We kayaked, hiked, went horseback riding, and took an excursion across the lake to see the Tsataan reindeer herders, a nomadic tribe who live in teepees and who come south in the summer from the extreme Siberian north of Mongolia. They treated us to tea inside their teepee, and we enjoyed their quiet hospitality. To fly back to UB and then home, we had to go by way of Ulgi in the extreme west of Mongolia. We just got a peek, but the landscape there is stunning, and it's in the area famous for Mongolian eagle hunting. We'll have to save that for another trip. I hope this inspired you to consider Mongolia as a travel destination. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe to my channel for more inspirations on thriving gracefully. And be sure to check out the other videos in my exotic travel series. See you next time.